Please do not interrupt the speaker while presenting. For questions, please input them into the chat box and we will ask them to the speaker at the end of the session. I'll hand over the floor to my colleague, Lean.
Hello, guys. So I'm the vice president of the team, YP team in Lebanon, and I will be presenting Dr. Imad Bazzi, our speaker now for advocacy and outreach. So Imad Bazzi is an award-winning activist, advocacy expert. He is a university lecturer. He's recognized by Foreign Policy magazine, and he's among the most influential online figures in 2011. Imad Bazzi worked for several international organizations, including Greenpeace, the UN, the IWPR, and the Sustainable Democracy Center. He is also an ex-TV anchor and radio show host. Imad, it's a pleasure to have you with us in the first edition of SYPLC. Now the floor is yours.
Eileen, thank you for the nice introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today. We're doing this in a very tense situation. I'm currently, let's say, surrounded and stuck in a building between protesters and armed forces. So let's hope this goes on well. Internet connection at some point, I'll quickly try to reconnect using another connection. So basically, today's session is about advocacy and lobbying. This is a very, very, very long presentation and very big subject. Usually it takes around 36 hours to finish this entire presentation, but I tried to more or less compile it and take only the important stuff in order to give you a good roundup on advocacy and lobbying. So my name is Imad Bazzi. I'm the founder of Empower Advocacy. Empower Advocacy is an organization that works on training and supporting researchers and activists launching advocacy campaigns. What we do is that we train people and organizations and NGOs and sometimes companies on build up for their campaigns and mainly causes related to human rights. As you can see, my major is in psychology, health. I come from a medical background, but something changed my life and got me interested in advocacy. I could have been a surgeon or a doctor, or I would have been an engineer or something else. I could have been a thief because I have good persuasion techniques and I can present good skills. So in terms of convincing others, this makes perfect thief or politician, works both ways. Anyway, as a kid, I grew up in a loving family, just like any other Lebanese family, loved by my parents, and to a certain extent, things were going great, and just like any other Lebanese family. But I always had one question that I used to ask my father, why do you always have a gun? So my father used to say that this gun is meant for us to defend the family and defend what we believe in. And this gun is more or less sacred, not in religious terms, but in, let's say, national terms. So I kept asking this question, and these were the answers I used to get. Like any other Lebanese house, we have the living room, or like this huge living room that we never used. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So we had this huge room that we never used, and I was so scared of getting into this room because there was a statue in the room, and it had a spotlight on top of it. It was scary because it was half the head of a man, and this man was scary to me because the room was always dark, and there was a spotlight right on top of this statue. So, in order for me to go into the room, my parents told me, "This is your great grandfather, Lenin." So I grew up thinking Lenin is my great grandfather. So when I asked my parents, "Why do we have a statue of Lenin?" they said, "He's your grandfather." And what does he present? They said he represents everything that is good, and everyone who hates Lenin is pure evil. So I grew up thinking that this is the case. I went to school, and just like any other school, I was happy at school. I had a favorite teacher. Actually, she was a French teacher. This is part of why I don't speak French anymore. But to keep the story short, she asked us to write an essay about someone who we look up to in our families. So, of course, all my friends wrote about their fathers and their brothers who take them out for trips and they go fishing and hunting and camping or whatever. I wrote about my great grandfather, Lenin, and how good he is. So, back then I was in not so liberal school. So the teacher was like, "No, Lenin is not your grandfather." But I insisted because my father told me that that the most important thing Lenin can teach us is that we don't lie. He was someone trying to uh, simplify communist strategies and communist ideologies to a kid like me. So I insisted that Lenin is my grandfather, and she still insisted that no, he's not. So I climbed up the table, I jumped, I kicked my teacher, and I got expelled from school at the age of 6 or 7. So that was the very first time I got myself into trouble because of my political affiliation. And uh, and back then, I didn't even understand what's the political affiliation. Anyway, I grew up as a teenager asking myself questions and coming up with analysis of things. I somehow came up with a lot of conclusions. Number one was that Lenin is not my grandfather. My father can lie somehow, though he told me we never lie. And things are not always what they tell us they are. Things are not always true. And whatever they teach us is what we grow on thinking that this is the ultimate truth. Uh, I wrote an article about that later on, uh, saying the title of the article was Lenin is not my grandfather. I linked this childhood story to the political situation in Lebanon before 2005. I just missed one very tiny detail that someone will not like this article and will think differently about. I wrote another article talking about this issue and what happened to me, and I also missed that point that there is always someone who's not going to like it. Then I kept getting myself in trouble whenever I write something with my own name. Because, as you know, Lebanese newspapers, they will never let you write an article or publish your article with a fake name unless you're a very prestigious writer or author. So I needed something to hide my identity. This is when internet stepped in to Lebanon. And I started my own blog called Trella.org. I kept posting things on the blog under this fake name, under this nickname, Trella, which means in Arabic, or in Latin Arabic, it means a huge truck. It was my secret nickname. And under this nickname, I used to post and write articles freely, maintaining my identity anonymous. Until one day, people kept interacting with the blog. One day, someone sent me this video that I'm going to show you now.
اسمع كذاب اسمع كذاب اسمع غني غني غني
I think there was a problem with the video. I sure hope you at least heard the sound. The video shows a child being beaten up at a Lebanese police station. Policemen were making fun of him, asking him, "What's your name?" He says, "Brahim." Then he says, "You're a liar," and he like slap him once or twice, and then he asks the little boy to sing. And when the boy starts singing because he's so scared, they also beat him up. So the thing is, I posted this video on my blog. I asked people to give us information, whatever information they.
Ahmad, I believe we cannot hear you. Ahmad, can you hear me? All right, guys, it seems that our speaker, Ahmad, is experiencing some internet connection problems. Just bear with us a couple of minutes as we are trying to reach him. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry, I lost connection. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so the thing is, we posted this video online and asked people to give us information on the video, the most amount of information they can give us. Later on, it turned out that this boy works as an Algeria delivery. And he delivers shisha to the police station. So number one, they order shisha to the police station. This is okay, but it goes ugly when we found out that this boy is only 13 years old. They give him drugs. Actually, the police gives the boy drugs so that he can deliver drugs to or sell drugs to local addicts. And then they go and arrest the local addict. They beat him up, and he tells them who is in charge of distributing this hash and weed or whatever in the area. They go and they arrest him, and then beat that guy up. He tells them who is the dealer in Beirut area. They go and they beat the dealer in Beirut area up, and he tells them who imports it from the Bekaa area. And then they go and arrest that guy, also beat him up, and he would tell them who is the main provider. That guy is always safe. They would never come near that guy. But they were using a child to go through this chain so they can arrest drug addicts, along with other violations of human rights and children's rights. So they were using this guy. We told people that those officers are wanted in the name of law and child protection or whatever. And we managed online with that campaign. We called it حقك سحسوح, or you're worth a slap, something. We asked people to give us information. They gave us information. We lobbied using that information, and we got them arrested. Everyone who was involved in this video got arrested, and the child was saved. This is when we came up with, we've bumped into the concept for the first time. When you have someone who has something to say or request, and this request can reach people, we can reach change. Something can change. If you have a mobilizer, and this mobilizer has a message and uses a platform, social media is one example, uses this platform to reach out to people, they can bring about change. Something can change. And this is one of the most important concepts of advocacy, because advocacy is gathering support or recommendations for a particular cause or policy to change a current situation, something that needs to be changed, whether a huge nationwide policy or a simple problem in a very restricted or small area, local area, whatever. So this is the concept of advocacy. This is where we learned that we can mobilize people and create messages and use platforms to reach out people, and people are the ones who can make change happen. In Lebanon and almost everywhere around the world, we had schools of advocacy. The old school of advocacy, how we used to do it, is that we had lobbying groups pressuring decision makers to change something. And this was very hard because the decision maker was stronger. Who are the lobbying groups to lobby a decision maker who has the money, who has the power, who has followers, everything? So this was really hard, and unfortunately, we still do that. And this is the old school that is not working. Here comes, and this is where Empower Advocacy steps to tell people and activists about the new school of advocacy, where the lobbying groups, they don't go and pressure the decision maker. They go and educate people. They tell them what is going on. They give them proofs. They give them analysis. They give them the power. They empower them, and people are the ones who will lobby and pressure the decision makers. So this it's a totally different approach. We group, like the lobbying group, sometimes may not have enough legitimacy to pressure decision maker, but people, they are the ones who the decision makers listen to. This is exactly why a decision maker or a politician, let's say, would always, regardless of how strong he is, he will always have to appeal to people during the elections. So this is this new school of advocacy. You don't go and pressure the decision maker. The people will pressure the decision maker. All you have to do is to empower the people and give them solutions to do that. So what changed between two different schools? We have more power, we have more influence, because it depends. It largely, on a wide scale, depends on numbers. It's not about luck anymore. It's about strategy and science, because advocacy and lobbying is now a standalone science. It's a science of its own. It's a university major now. You can actually go and study advocacy, peacemaking, and lobbying. The strategies that we use depend highly now on numbers of people, because we can create even more powerful message. We can outreach more people and reach more people. We can engage what we call bystanders. Those people who just step aside, just watch things happen, are now part of the campaigns, because the campaign will always try to reach out to those people and get them engaged within whatever we do. And guess what? This new strategy, this new way of advocacy, the new School of Advocacy, has much bigger success rate. In our calculations, we think that an advocacy campaign based on the old school has no more than 15% success rate, while an advocacy campaign built on the new School of Advocacy has more than 40% success rate, which is really good in the world of advocacy. So where did all this theory come from? It came from academic research, because people now started researching, and activists and organizations and research centers and think tanks, they started researching new ways to reach out to people. It came from experience and the buildup of experience between advocates themselves, because they had been through several campaigns and trying several ways and strategies and whatever. And not to mention the increase in political awareness among the people, because there's more access to media, there is more access to information. People are more aware now of their political situation. They have social media platforms where they can discuss and build up ideas. And the most important thing is that there's a change in mentality, from the mentality of the herd, where you only follow, to solo analysis, where you, in terms of social media and nowadays, everyone is an analyst. We have this joke that we say, in terms of the World Cup, we have 4 million Lebanese people. They totally shift to, so we can have 4 million sports analysts. And when we have a protest, we have 4 million political analysts. So we all analyze. That's what we do. We analyze, because we are not part of the herd anymore. We shifted to analysis. And most important is that there's a need to develop new ways and strategies to pressure decision makers around the world. So why do we advocate causes? This is one of the most important questions. Why do we have a cause that we have to advocate for? We advocate for one single word, which is change. We want to change something. Remember, in the very basic definition of advocacy, we said that it's all about gathering support and recommendations towards changing something, changing a fact or a situation that we think is not right. So the key is change. But the thing is, who does change? Who is like the entity, the group or whatever who does change? It's not the advocates. It's not the advocates. It's not the lobbying group. It's not whatever. People are the ones who make change. People can change everything. So we as cause advocates or lobbying groups or whatever, we depend highly and largely on people, because they are the ones who can make change happen. So if they are the ones who can make change, so why do they need us as community mobilizers or whatever? They need us because people are of so many different kinds and types. People sometimes are not aware of the problem or the need to change. They might not know that there's a problem that needs to be addressed or solved. Some people are even aware, but they don't care. They might be aware of the problem, of the need for change, but they simply just don't care. Some people are aware, they do care, but they need the solution. They know that there's a problem and they're really interested in helping out or bringing up change, but they need the solution. Others are aware, they care, they have the solution, but they lack the know-how on how to apply the solution or even how to campaign for it. And there are others who are aware, who do care, who have the solution, who also have the know-how, but they lack resources. And these resources might be financial or like human or manpower or whatever. And the people who are aware of the problem, they sometimes care, they don't have the know-how, they have the solution, they even have the resources, but they just don't want to do something about it for so many different factors and conditions. So a successful advocacy campaign should make the ones who everyone who doesn't know or is not aware of the problem, he should be aware of it. Those who are not interested or don't care should be part of the solution. And those who care and know the problem and do not have the solution, our job is to present them with the working solution and tell them how to do it and get resources to do it. And in order to make and reach change, we have to, all these people that we saw, the ones who are not aware, they should be aware. Others who don't care, they should care, because we should give them the reasons to care. And others who lack the solution, we should come up with a solution. There's no advocacy campaign without a working solution, at least in order to reach change. So why do we use advocacy campaigns? Because things and causes can't be solved on an individual level. If it can't be solved on an individual level, there's no need for a campaign. Because decision makers will never give up, because they are on the strong side, and most of the time we are on the weak side. We do campaigns to gather public support towards a cause or whatever. We do it to increase pressure on stakeholders and decision makers. Sometimes, and I think this does not apply for our condition now in Lebanon, sometimes the decision makers might be busy from noticing the fact or the problem. So we do an advocacy campaign so they can notice that there is a problem. This is totally not for the Middle East, at least. So the goals of advocacy, it's the voice of the unheard. We do campaigns in order to voice the sound of people. We support the victims or whoever is being affected by the cause itself or the problem itself. We do it to change public policies or local policies or private policies or whatever. And sometimes we do it to ward off danger. We do sometimes advocacy campaigns in order to change something that might happen in the future. And we will talk about that later on. But there are lots and lots and lots and lots of types of advocacy campaigns. We'll talk about a few. There's organizational advocacy. It works within one body, one solid body, let's say, an election in a political party. It's one body, it's one entity, but every candidate should lobby and should reach out to different voters within the same body. We have internal advocacy, or sometimes we tend to call it policy advocacy, where you actually lobby for a policy change inside one entity. It's not about gathering support or whatever, it's about changing policies. And here is one of the very funny things that happened when the team of Empower Advocacy, back in 2016, we had a big team, and I was training them on internal advocacy. They used that against me, so we ended up making the shift much shorter. We used to start at 9, so we ended up starting work at 11 and ending and wrapping it up at 3, because they did manage to start an internal advocacy campaign. So other types of advocacy campaigns, we have the programmatic advocacy, where it runs based on a program. Most famous is the UNICEF campaign towards ending up. I can't remember the name of the disease, but it was a very, very, very famous campaign. I think it was polio. It was an international campaign to end polio by the year 2000, something like that. And we have local advocacy, where you apply this campaign on a very small area or local communities, such as a municipality or whatever. And my all-time favorite, international advocacy. It's trying to gather support to draw attention towards a cause, on an international scale. There are lots of examples. The Stop Coney campaign that was done in the United States, it was one of the most inspiring campaigns, where actually voters from the Democratic and the Republican Party came together to put an end to Joseph Kony, who is the leader of the Army of God in Uganda. He used to use and abuse children as fighters. The Syria campaign, with their famous movie that they did, who won the Oscars, the Aleppo burning campaign, it was one of the most also influential campaigns. I tried to come up with examples related to the Middle East as well. So international advocacy tries to gather international support or draw the attention of the international community towards a cause that we are working on. So part of our problem in advocacy is that people have different opinions, and sometimes they might not be in our favor. There is this huge theory, widely spread theory on the impact of on how politicians and decision makers use media to get the support of people. One of the most interesting theories is the over theory. Always in advocacy, we tend to look at people as, of course, they are equal. So we look at people on a straight line. And this straight line has two different sides, two different poles. One is positive and one is negative, at least towards our belief. So we tend to see that we are always in the middle, living in a place that we call normal, because this is the norm we got used to. This is what we always heard about. This is what we are used to hear. So this becomes the normal. Outside the normal comes the things that are a little bit radical on both ends, because people can have two different opinions about a campaign or a story or a cause. And then comes the things that are ridiculous and almost unbelievable. And then comes the unthinkable. So the way politicians do it is they keep telling you about the ridiculous stuff that you can't even imagine and can't even believe. They keep on repeating that over and over and over and over. So instead of going for ridiculous, when they talk about the unthinkable and the ridiculous all the time, you tend to shift, because the radical becomes more acceptable. The ridiculous becomes more acceptable. It's only normal and basic human rights that you have 24/7 electricity in Lebanon. But when the unthinkable happens and they tell you, we are sorry, we can only provide 4 hours of electricity per day, then the ridiculous and the radical, which is 12 hours of electricity per day, seems to become more acceptable. So this is how they shift us to think normally about the radical stuff. This is why people can tend to be extreme sometimes and defend their extreme ideas, because the radical and the ridiculous can become the normal for them. So this is where we step in. We can use this for in our favor. It doesn't only work against us. We can use that actually in our favor in advocacy campaigns, and later on we'll move to talk about that. So there are different factors of success for advocacy campaigns. It has to be connected to reality, to the real life and field. It has to be real. It has to have acceptable support from the people. This is not like a general condition, but it has to be acceptable. People should be aware, or at least not only aware, they should have some sort of support or enough support for the campaign to start. The campaign should always take the current situation into consideration. For example, now, if there's a very huge economic crisis in Lebanon, I can't simply launch an advocacy campaign towards on deforestation or whatever, where people are dying and then can't even have enough access to food and medical support. Now, even with the case in COVID-19. So we have to always to take the current situation into consideration. We have to understand the problem. We have to analyze the problem so we can come up with a solution. So a key factor of having an influential campaign is that it has to be real, comes up from the core of the problem and the core of the situation we're working on now. It has to be linked to priorities, because the cause we're working on should be a priority and is a priority for people. And also it has to get the priority in terms of solution, because we live in a very troubled community and very troubled society to a certain extent. So we have a lot of problems. So this campaign we're working on has to go on the ladder of priorities in terms of solution. And like, for example, what are the main priorities now? It's safety, it's food, it's medical care, it's trying to provide dollars instead of Lebanese pounds because it's collapsing. So these are the priorities. The campaign should be linked to the priorities. And these, we have to make sure that we know that such priorities are always shifting and not always the same. And whenever we're launching a campaign, this campaign should not be in direct conflict with urgent needs of the people. So it has to be connected to a reality. It has to be a link to the priorities of the people, and it has to be linked to the general spirit of the audience, the general spirit of the people we're working on, because we are trying to address a community. What the cause should be socially acceptable to a certain extent. We can't launch a campaign that is always triggering points and alarming other people. It has to be appealing to everyone or almost everyone. And it has to speak their language. And by speaking their language, I don't mean the language as in Arabic or English or French. Speaks the language means that it targets their daily life and daily living activities. It speaks the language and thinks about like the same way they think. And as an example, if you're Lebanese, I can see some chat going on, so I sure hope you can hear me. Okay. So the thing is, it has to be in line with the general spirit of the audience itself. I'm going to show you a video. And Mazen, thank you. I just saw that. You have to excuse my English. I'm originally not English educated, so I'm trying my best. So let's talk about understanding the general spirit of the audience. Once we started a campaign for organ donation in Lebanon, in the US, and few years later, we had to start the same campaign in Saudi Arabia. So the general spirit of the audience is totally different between the US and Saudi Arabia. It's totally different. It's a different mentality. It's a different society, different priorities. So let's see how did we manage to do it, knowing that advocacy has a set of rules. So we use the same rules, the same strategies, but we applied it differently on two different communities. Let's see first the campaign in the US.
This is a story about Coleman Sweeney. Coleman, in short, was an asshole. Everyone in his small town knew it. It wasn't that he tried particularly hard to be unpleasant. It just seemed to come naturally to him. Coleman felt like the whole world owed him something, which caused him to regularly ignore the rules of a decent, acceptable society. And he hated anything that got in his way.
Go, you got it. You got it, go. Go, go, you can do it.
And small animals. Even to children, he was an asshole. He was, as they say, born to it. But then, the strangest thing happened. Something entirely unexpected. Coleman Sweeney died. A brain aneurysm. Well, subarachnoid hemorrhage to be more specific. And it came as he argued over whether extra fries should be included in a $1.99 early bird breakfast, which was a typical Coleman Sweeney play. It was then that